Welcome to this video edition of Taking the Myth. I'm Stephen Knight. I'm very pleased to be bringing you a conversation with Douglas Murray. Douglas is an author and political commentator who writes for The Spectator, amongst other publications. He can also regularly be seen in the media across Europe and the USA. His latest book is called The Strange Death of Europe: Immigration, Identity, Islam, which I highly recommend. Douglas was in Manchester to give the Hollyoake Lecture for Humanist UK and was kind enough to sit down with me and my co-host Iram Ramzan to discuss a number of topics. Two notes. We recorded this at Douglas's hotel, and although we found the quietest spot available, we had no control over the sporadic cheesy pop music playing over the hotel PA system, so just try to tune it out or sing along, whatever. I'm not here to judge. Secondly, due to a technical glitch, the last 90 seconds of this interview is audio only, so apologies for that. All in all, a great conversation, and I'm very grateful to Douglas for making the time to speak to us. If you enjoy the content that I produce and wish to support it, you can do so by visiting gspellchecker.com/support. You can also support the excellent work Iram Ramzan is doing by visiting sedar.org. And please remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Enjoy! Welcome to this special video edition of Taking the Myth. I'm Stephen Knight and I'm joined by Iram Ramzan.
Hello.
And very pleased to welcome Douglas Murray to Manchester. Hello.
Hello.
How's the city treating you so far?
I got in minutes ago, so it's too early to tell.
Excellent. Wanted to jump in on your book, which seems to be doing very well. It's taken you to a lot of places, and it's had quite a big reaction to it. And I suppose one of the big focuses of your book is immigration, and I wanted to ask about pretty much the conversation surrounding that. It seems as if the public discourse is you either agree with the current immigration policy or you're a racist. So.
Right.
That seems to be the mainstream discourse on this. And so why do we have this conversation so badly, do you think?
It's just about the worst conversation in the public sphere, isn't it? I think it's lots of things. One, by the way, is a perfectly legitimate fear that if you have the conversation badly, raucously, you will upset, and perhaps a lot of people. Admittedly, almost every conversation now in the public square has this thing of you could do somebody harm with your words. So it's not entirely unusual, but I think it's a particular concern. So it starts off in a sort of good place, but I think where you get to is as you described, that either you're for everything that we've had recently and more, or you say hold the horses a bit, and then you're a Nazi, bigot, racist, fascist, so on. And I would like to think that, as it were, a self-appointed task of mine is to try to plug that gap, to address the situation as it is, to be frank and fairly forthright in what I think is happening, in order to fill up some of that space and to try to start thinking about it, because goodness knows it's late in the day, but we should be able to have a better discussion on this.
I'm glad you've actually brought that out, because Gabby Hinsley from The Guardian described it as gentrified xenophobia.
Yes.
I don't know what your response to that would be.
It's a good quote for the paperback edition, perhaps.
Yes, I'm going to send her a box of chocolates, actually, because that anarchy review by her enormously helped sales. The number of people who say, if The Guardian shits on you that hard, as it were, you must be onto something. I wasn't ever expecting a rave from The Guardian for this book, as one of the principal journals of trying to stop this discussion happening at all. I wouldn't have expected any Guardian reviewer to read the book, let alone give it a fair hearing.
It is on their bookshop, though, to be fair.
I wonder how many copies they sold through their bookshop.
I do wonder.
It'd be a very strange thing to actually get to the end of that review with a Guardian reader and say, now I'm definitely going to buy this book. But the general reaction, we had 18 weeks in a row in the top 10 bestsellers. I think it will be one of the top-selling, best-selling non-fiction books of the year. The publishers announced their quarterly results were up because of my book, The Strange Death of Europe, and the reissue of the Harry Potter books. I think Harry Potter did slightly better, I have to reveal to you, and the film rights haven't been sold for mine. So on that front, I mean, that's, by the way, with books, it genuinely, you don't, I mean, I've written 4 books now, and they've sold in various ways. One of them sold very well before, a couple not very much, and this one sold very well. It's very nice, and you can't write for that. But I have to say that when things do sell, it really does tell you something. I mean, it you know, not only the sale, but then the discovery from reaction from readers, letters, emails, and so on, that people are reading it. After all, a lot of books sell and nobody reads them. But I'm very happy about this. I'm very happy that a lot of people are worried about this, want to think about it, want to be able to discuss it more deeply, more widely, and that in some way I've helped to do that. Whether it'll have any follow-on effect in political discourse, I have no idea. But yes, I mean, the reactions on these sort of things are always going to be slightly divided. There have been great reviews and some panning reviews. But as I say, I mean, to me, the most important thing is that people are buying it and reading it.
There seems to be a huge focus in your book on identity, or lack thereof in Europe, and it seems like we don't have something to push back with or unite around in order to, as a response to the mass immigration. But it might be a surprise to many of my listeners to note that you kind of favour almost an emergence of Christianity again to fill that hole, or at least you look back on it fondly. And I was wondering maybe you could speak a little bit about what Christianity means in your life as a secular atheist.
This is a very, very difficult issue on which I lose almost everybody. By the way, on this whole discussion, there's been an enormous focus. I'm so pleased you asked this, because among critics and admirers of the book, there's been an enormous focus on the issue of the immigration bit. But as I say at the beginning, the immigration, in a way, is a smaller part of this issue. The bigger question is the identity question, is the who are we? What is the collective that we are now? And very few people have taken that up, and I wish they would. I think it's in some ways a harder and more complicated problem. I don't say that we should, as it were, re-evangelize the continent or anything like this. What I suggest is that there is a serious values challenge, or a set of values challenge at the moment, which our society is proving very, very weak in the face of. We are, I think, across Europe, arriving at this discovery that we started off at various points in recent decades thinking that and in these centuries you could say, thinking that what we had should be put outwards and, as it were, should be shared with the world. And then in recent years in particular, that started to pall. And now we're at this stage, I think, of, well, could we just have it for ourselves? And I'm not persuaded that the rather, I think, deracinated and shallow, as I repeatedly say, offerings that we've come to are enough. Now this, by the way, as you well know, both of you, is in the secular and atheist community a deep divide. Those who believe that atheism is, as it were, just a way to clear away the dead wood and bracken and then get on to something else, and those who believe it's a way to clear away the bracken and so on and then just do whatever you want. I'm just very haunted by my travels of recent years, not just across Europe whilst writing this book, but across many other regions of the world, by the just premonition, as it were, that in response to creeds which believe very, very strongly in something, the simple offering up of a sort of space where anyone can pursue pretty much what they want may not be the answer. It may mean that we have, as I've said before, very little to counter very fundamentalist views of all sorts of different varieties, but particularly Islam. It may be that we need more to counter them than a kind of perpetual replay of the only way is Essex. That a sort of shopping and consumerism, as it were, it may not answer, I think does not answer, the questions, the existential questions, which everybody asks at some point in their life. Now, I don't say that religion is the only way to answer this, but religion is one of the answers. I can think of others, but this isn't just something that can be pursued by philosophers and thinkers and so on. It has to be something that's lived by large numbers of people. And that's why I, at any rate, believe that it's possible to have an alliance of, as it were, the liberal form of believer who knows where the place of religion should be in the society, that is, not adjudicating on the lives of non-believers and so on. And at the same time, that I think that non-believers should recognize some of the things that religion speaks to, which we cannot, and make peace with elements of it.
The issue of identity is a really important one, and it is something that I picked up in the book. As you said, a lot of people are focused on immigration, but I actually did pick up on the issue of identity, what it means. So what do you think Europe's identity is or ought to be? And how you said religion speaks to some people.
Yes.
When you speak to some people who have, say, converted to Islam, and they do mention this sort of identity crisis, don't
Yes.
they? And religion seems to offer that.
Yes, I'm sure, like both of you, I've been just very struck by conversations in recent years with particularly with converts to Islam. And I say at one point in the book, they're almost identical, the stories. There's this particular time of life, usually toward the end of youth and beginning of middle age, where people start to say, what's this about? What am I doing? These are questions everyone's always asked, but it's unusual to have a society that offers nothing in return other than, enjoy yourself in whatever way you can. And I'm very struck that fundamentalist forms of religion, particularly Islam, say to people, we have the answer to everything: birth, death, life, love, the afterlife, the hereafter, eternity, God, the lot.
Simplistic solutions
absolutely,
or answers
but
to
but
complex
but at the very least, that acknowledge the existence of these questions. And I don't have all the answers to this, but I know that we should be trying to work out, as it were, what a meaning-filled existence would be in 21st century Europe. Because I think that if we don't apply ourselves to some extent to this, then I know what the answers are that lie down the road. One of them will be a revived form of nationalism of some kind, that type of belonging will become more acceptable than it is now. I could see a form of, much as I would fear and abhor it, I could see a return of racial politics. I could see a return of all sorts of things like that, because, and apart from anything else, by the way, if I may say so, a lot of the oiling up of that work is currently being done by people who can't possibly see where they're heading. What I'm thinking of is, of course, the people who pursue identity politics, because the pursuit of identity politics must end at some point in an identity for the people whose identity has been stopped from being expressible. And I deeply warn people not to go down this route from whatever direction they think they're doing it, and to try to find that identity that you could get meaning from and a form of community from, to be one that's based on civic values that are colorblind, race blind, gender blind, and so on. And I just, somehow it feels to me that that's being made harder. And for me, the European, just quickly, the European, Europe has always been a massive number of things. I mean, I think that the way we got here is fairly clear at any rate, but the inheritance of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, the inheritance of the Christian faith sweeping across the continent, and then of the refining fires of the Enlightenment seem to me to be, broadly speaking, the things that have produced what we are. But in order to continue to be that, you at least have to stay aware of those origins. And I suppose here, sorry, I said this was a final point, but here is one of the really big conundrums we're all going to have to face in our lives. We have assumed that where we've got to is normal. And where we've got to in the great scheme of things is highly abnormal. Believing in human rights, for instance, wanting to uphold human rights, very, very unusual. And I think vulnerable. And so I think we need to recognise how unusual it is in order to sustain it, really.
Okay, so the book's titled The Strange Death of Europe, so death being the operative word there. Do you think it's over in that sense, if we all suddenly became awake to this idea and issues of immigration and started to try and turn the tide? Is that a losing battle anyway?
I am very pessimistic about it, not by nature, but just I think that if the facts are pessimistic, I become pessimistic. I say in the book what I think could be done to apply ourselves to this and to get ourselves out of the situation, but I've not got enormous hope that we will. I think that broadly speaking, it boils down to the two things. One is the massive movement of people from around the world that will increase in the years ahead if we continue not being able to police our borders, not being able to not encourage the world in, and basically not being able to find any way to say that Europe shouldn't be the home of absolutely everyone who just manages to make it here. And the combination of that with these big values chasms seems to me to be a very hard thing to recover from. But I don't say it's impossible. It seems to me to be very hard. And by the way, I mean, aren't all of the first warnings kind of troubling? I mean, we're sitting in Manchester, and it's only 4-5 months ago since massive terrorist attack here at a pop concert, killing 22 people, mainly young women. And nobody knows what to do any more than we did before then. And no one seems to want to kind of linger on it for any time. In fact, we had the kind of peace and reconciliation concert about exactly what before the dead were buried. And I think these are very bad signs. I think it's because we don't know what to do. Let me give you another bad sign. If you were one of those like me who sincerely hopes and believes that one of the answers to some of these problems will come about by a liberalisation and reform within communities who move here with somewhat illiberal and unreformed ideas, what worse bit of news could you have than the fact that even after all these years of concentration on it, we between us could probably count on two hands the number of people who are outspoken from within the communities in question and who really campaign for that. And then with a rider, which is who are the ones who get all the crap? It's them. It's not the the Hamas commander who lives in London. He's fine. He's never had any problem, as far as I know. It's the secular liberal reformers within the Islamic faith, and that seems to me to be a very, very bad sign. Because by now, if it was going to go in a different direction, it shouldn't be the case that that the only reformers around would be people who I'm sure between us we have in our phones.
Yes.
I know in the past you've sort of been quite sceptical of the prevent strategy, although recently you've been maybe less critical of it because you acknowledge that there's a need for such a strategy. Yeah. What issues did you have with it, and if so, do you have any suggestions on how it can be improved and what it could actually tackle?
I have been less sceptical of Prevent as it's gone along because it's got better and I think more clear in its aims. I was very damning of Prevent at the start because
you described it as a cash
big cash cow. Yeah. I mean, by the way, this happens in anything. Anyone who I once wrote a book about Northern Ireland. By the way, that's a subject which you really can't sell books about anymore. But I saw this in Northern Ireland. If you go into any community and you say, look, we want to sort out a problem and we've got millions and millions of pounds in grants we could give, everybody will say, he's an extremist, you give money to me. And it takes a while to just get that right and to know what you're doing. And we were really, really slow on that at the beginning, I think, in this country, and everyone was. But there's a period of massive hucksterism, and that definitely happened. And I was also particularly, by the way, struck that other communities started to notice this problem. I never forget the conversation with some representatives of the Sikh community who, at one point in conversation, said to me, we've never got this money for our youth. Like we don't get like all these groups and sort of big cash bonanzas to our community, that's because 4 of our young men haven't gone and blown up the London Underground, And so I thought it was very divisive for all these sorts of reasons, and I thought it was unfocused. I think it's become much more focused, and there's definitely a need for something like it. And I think the people who tend to be completely anti-prevent aren't against the particular policy, they're against any policy which tackles this area. They just don't think the British government should do anything about Islamic extremism. They think the government should shut up, suck it up, and get a lot more body bags. And I think, to an extent, that the campaign against Prevent has made it easier to see not only the virtues that do now exist in Prevent, and there are lots of cases I can think of Prevent working, but also it clarifies, as I say, the people who really are against it and why.
You're someone who has a lot of conversations in the media with people either on the left or on the right and the centre, and I've noticed there's a heavy focus on conversation policing at the minute. Somebody's had a conversation with somebody who once said something off colour once, so they shouldn't speak to that person. You can't share a platform with this person. And how do you navigate that kind of noise?
Yeah, it's weird, that one. It's the he danced with she who danced with him who met the queen of whatever. It's a game of a kind. I do think that a lot of people spend their time talking about people and not to them. And I've been fairly promiscuous in my willingness to sit down with. I mean, honestly, you two are at the very, very happiest end of this.
Well, you have shared a platform with Anjem Chowdhury, which shows that you're willing to sit with just about anyone.
And I mean, it doesn't delight me, but if somebody says, we've got Anjem Chowdhury, now mercifully a guest of Her Majesty's Prison Service, if somebody said, we've got Anjem Chowdhury coming to the studio and we need somebody else, then and I mean, there are, as it were, better minds than his who I've grappled and wrestled with over the years, and I think it's a duty as well as a pleasure to do that. I think, you're right. There is a strange policing element about it, and a strange. There's a sort of prissiness about it, really. A sort of, little miss, don't dirty your hands. I'm going to be so adamant that I'll never speak to anyone who's ever had a nasty thought. And you think, what are you doing? I mean, that's not journalism. I mean, so if you're a journalist, right, you can't do that. I mean, you've got to hear a lot of opinions. And I mean, it's another thing, of course, if somebody says horrible things, you don't challenge them on it. That's definitely. I mean, there is always an argument about that. So, for instance, if I, decided to have a sit down with Nick Griffin, and not only didn't ask him, difficult questions, but I don't know, thought it was wise to kind of encourage him then that would be a legitimate criticism of whoever did that. But if it's having, important conversations with a wide range of people, I can't see what the problem is, other than this sort of seat-sniffing tendency where people think their self-appointed role in life. Normally they're called names on Twitter. They're people who've never shown their face in public. Yeah. They never put their face to their opinions. They sit and lurk on the sort of social media thing and like cosh everyone else on the head when they have the courage to speak. And I've no time for those people. You may have got that sense.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to get a last question in for Douglas?
I thought this was quite an important one because it's something as the people on the social media thing often talk about. In your book, you say that where people are talking about the rise of the far right, you believe that actually there's a decline. First of all, I wanted you to just elaborate on that. And also, there are certain groups out there who are criticised, say for example, the Front National in France or Geert Wilders. The recent one in Germany, is it the AFD?
The AFD, yeah.
And they're often described as far right or fascist, whereas you don't. And this is where some of your critics will say that you're just apologising for some rather nasty group. So I just wanted you to elaborate.
No, I'm very glad you do raise that. I think something very bad has happened in recent years in relation to this. I think there has been a very opportunistic thing, particularly from the left, to identify everybody they disagree with as Nazis and fascists and racists. Now, there's a lot of problems with this. One is that I think very often, demonstrably, it's not true. And increasingly people have been able to see it's not true. Like Anne Cryer, the Labour MP who I think first spoke about what turned out to be the Rotherham sex gang scandal, was called a racist by loads of people at the time. Okay, Anne Cryer is not a racist. It's just so obvious. But these people in this country and across Europe diminished the term and diminished all of these terms. And they did it, I think, for short-term political gain. Not just that, called somebody a Nazi and far right, and then, you can smear them enough that everyone else will stay away from them. But also that, of course, if you do that, then you are an anti-Nazi and you are basically Churchill to the Hitler of these people. It's very self-aggrandizing, very convenient, a lovely feeling, But I think they've done it wrongly on a whole set of people, and I think in particular that what has happened is that I think there is a bit of the conversation within that sphere of what you listed of the freedom, particularly the Freedom Party in the Netherlands, and I know less about it, and they're definitely evolving and changing, and we'll see what happens. But the AFD in Germany, it has to be possible to have an anti-mass immigration, anti-Merkel 2015 madness party in Germany without calling them Nazis, unless they are Nazis. And if they're Nazis, then we should be all over them, and we should do everything we can to stop the rise, obviously, of any people like that. But, I say this in the book about the English Defence League, and I've taken a lot of flack for years about this, but I refuse to say that Tommy Robinson is a Nazi. I refuse to say that he is a fascist. I don't agree with him on everything, and I'm sure he wouldn't agree with me on everything. But it seems to me that if you've got somebody who just, as far as I know, has never said a racist thing, as far as I know, I've observed, is very, very comfortable and happy in, as it were, a multiracial Luton, but has a very big problem with the Islamic extremists who he saw on his streets and was talking about long before some other people were willing to, then, it would have been, I can't tell you how easy it would have been easier it would have been for my life and career if I'd have been willing to join in years ago and say, Tommy Robinson is a Nazi. I thought and think he is, as I say, I didn't agree with him on everything, he wouldn't agree with me on everything, but I think he's a working class guy who doesn't have a PhD and is worried about his country. And I refuse to join in the demonization of everybody just because it's helpful in the short term. And I think it would be untrue, and it would be wrong, because I think these terms matter. Now, my belief is, by the way, that the people who've been overusing these terms will regret their overuse at some point, because they might need them again sometime. And when they do need them, no one will believe them. So my simple suggestion is, consider all of these things, consider all of the individual groups and the individuals, see what they say, and work out, as I say at one point in the book, work out what, if you are a non, as it were, PhD-owning member of the public, how can you be worried about the things I'm talking about in my book, which are, by the way, all majority opinion worries. I mean, they are just every opinion poll. In remorseless detail, I show this. These are the things the general public in the majority are worried about. How can you express that worry without being a Nazi, fascist, racist? I think there are lots of people who are concerned about these things who are not Nazis, not racists, not fascists. And we will do a great disservice to our future if we, as I say, for short-term political gain, point the finger at everyone. There will be people, and there are people out there who are genuine extremists, genuine far-right nutters, genuine fascists, neo-Nazis, absolutely. But I worry at the attempt to make opinions which are held by the majority into opinions which are claimed to be unacceptable, because a great variety of disasters could be ahead of us, but one of the most foreseeable is that one, where you basically make the opinion of the majority of the public into an illegal opinion.
Okay, Douglas, well, it's been great to see you. I know you've got some preparations to do for a lecture tonight, so thanks for your time and all the best with that. Look forward to it.
A great pleasure.
Thank you very much.